So from my research, I've been looking at sort of a lot of training documents and videos on how policemen are trained, and also have some, white police officers as friends, and just trying to, pick their brains.
This man said that he has looked at training documents and manuals. That's what he just said. That he's looked at training manuals, and that's what he said. Now listen to what the rest of what he's going to say. He's looked at training manuals, and he's talked to his white police officer friends and people he knows about how they train and what they're going on in police academies. This is what he said.
So there is this, when you're talking about the weapon, right? So the presence of a weapon as the determinant to making a split-second decision. But there's more than that. It's not just the presence of a weapon. A white male police officer literally told me, if he sees a black male driving around with the windows down in the summer, that person is violent.
Hey everybody, it's your boy Captain Hunter coming at you. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Appreciate it. Make sure that you hit that rate, subscribe, and share button. Make sure that you hit that rate, subscribe, and share button. So we're going to have a little bit of a controversial conversation for today. Today we're going to talk about the difficulties of being black in America, and being a police officer. And I want to answer a particular question that I came across in this video that I got up here. You can't see the bottom of it, but it says, interrogating narrative of fear, in quotations, the fear of black men as a defense for unjust killings of black males. And this is done by the Lemon Project at the school, the University of William&Mary. They put on a number of seminars, symposiums, whatever they call them, guest speakers from different individuals who are all interested in black male studies in particular, Afrocentric in their philosophy, and and dealing mostly with black men. So I listened to a few of these. I listened to a brother. His name is Dr. t.hasanjohnson. He's a Afro. Gosh, I don't even know what his exact title is, but he's a professor at Fresno University in California, and he hosts a podcast. I believe the podcast is called The Onyx Report. It is on YouTube, so you guys can check it out if you're interested in that. So I listen to this because, I'm a black man. I have black sons, and I want to know, what's going on in here, know what this was about. And, well, I did know, I guess I could guess or summarize what the narrative of these presenters are going to be based on their narrative, based on the topic. So I just wanted to, there's no comments about this, so I hope I didn't mess this up. Let me just check and make sure. Okay, we're still where I need to be. So anyway, so that's what that is. So I want to talk to this. I want to talk a little bit about this. So there's I believe the host, or the moderator, I should call him, was a guy by the name of, I can't even think of his name. Dr. Tommy Curry, University of Edinburgh. I'm here. This was done back in 2022, April 2022, 2 years ago. Edinburgh being in Scotland. I'm pretty sure that now he has come back to the U.S. That's the last I've heard. I don't really follow him and know exactly where he is. But he was at one time in the university, or Texas A&M University. I think he got death threats, and I don't know what happened, but somehow he left Texas and then went to Scotland in order to set up the first well-known, recognized Black Male Studies program, or was the chair of the Black Male Studies over in Scotland, of all places. Don't really know what happened after that. I believe that he came back to Temple, but I'm not sure, and it's really not relevant as to what's going on here. But anyway, so he's the moderator. He's got three professors on here. Looks like Myron Clay Gilmore, graduate student, University of Edinburgh. What did I say before? Edinburgh, right? I think that's what I said. But Edinburgh. and that's in Scotland. So he's obviously studying under Tommy Curry, or was studying. Dr. Adubaye Alawanforsment. Forgive me for messing up these people's names. Howard University, and Dr. Talizo Rui, Queen's University. Queen's is probably in the UK. So there was a presenter already. Tommy Curry said some stuff. There was already a presenter, and this is the second presenter. And so I as I was listening to this, kind of just doing other things that got this going in the background, he started saying some things I really just couldn't understand. And so his thesis of his argument here is that he is that police officers are trained, and you'll hear him say this, I'm going to play it for you, are trained to kill Black men, and particularly in the United States. Police officers are trained to kill, particularly in the United States. Now, I don't have any problem with the history of this, right? I've taught history of policing. I understand it. I've read a number of different articles. I've read a number of psychological and sociological articles concerning, I'm reading a book right now talking about Jim Sudaneus's book, and it was him and another co-author, I forget the lady's name, talking about the target male hypothesis, social dominance theory, et cetera, et cetera. I'm reading that book right now. By a man, again, the author's name is Jim Sudaneus, talking about this type of thing, right? The sociological implications and how we have been socialized to hate or to despise or to disregard the lives of Black men. I got no problems with reading those type of materials and agreeing with a lot of it, not only in the United States, but in other places. In Jim Sudaneus, the author there, he was I believe he's a professor, I want to say in North Carolina, but I don't remember exactly where. So his thesis was that in all places where there is a dominant culture, they will often and always target target the subordinate male population, right? They, being the dominant male population, will then target the subordinate male population. This is true whether you're in France with the Algerians. This is true in Australia. This is true in South Africa. This is true no matter where anybody goes. They target the males for a number of reasons, right? They don't want anybody to uprise. They won't target the females because they can potentially be concubines and be accessible for sex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? This is all things that have been talked about in the so-called sociological literature, right? So this is something that it interests me because, obviously it's interesting, right? And so I did study forensic psychology, and so this is all interesting to me, right? So therefore I listen to it, I read it, and I want to understand it, not only as a Black man, but understand the sociological underpinnings that we deal with. How do we get out of this, and how do we stay out of the criminal justice system's way, and all this kind of stuff. So it's all interesting to me. But what I have a problem with is that he's saying that in this time, and let's just say this is 2022. I don't know that's when I believe this was published. Let's just say that 2020 or so, that he's saying that police officers were trained in their academies to be fearful and trained to kill Black men, trained to be fearful of Black men. And you'll hear him say it. It's not me saying this. I'm not being hyperbolic. He's going to say it. So again, we're going to start this off right here. This is him about to give a speech. I am obviously going to stop and interrupt it and all this kind of stuff. And we're going to play through this, right? And then I'm going to play what he has to say. Then we're going to fast forward a little bit to the end, and which is a question and answer period. And he's going to say it again, and other professors are going to chime in on this. So. And the problem I'm having is this is in the academy that they're saying this stuff. I know a number of police officers. I know a number of academy officials. No one is training this. They're trying to train people out of this. I'm not saying that this wasn't something that went on in the 1940s. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that there isn't an inherent implicit bias that is harbored within all of us, that we all have to work hard to conquer. I'm admitting that. But I am saying that when you go to a police academy, they are not going to say, be scared of Black men in versus an Asian person. That is not occurring. It is not occurring. So this is a paper that I guess that he presented. And I don't know if this is going to pop up here. Let me see if you can see this here. So this is me. I actually went to this, tried to find it. And you can't see it right here. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger here. You have to buy it. I am a member of 3, I believe. I'm a member of 4 schools, linked to 4 schools somehow. School I got my doctorate from, schools I adjunct at. I looked at every single one of those libraries. I cannot find this paper, and I'm not paying for it. So if someone wants to buy it for me, I'll send you the Cash App. You can, and I'll go through it because I'm interested in reading this. The reason I'm interested in it is because he's saying that he went through literature, and you'll hear him say this. He went through literature talking about that this is how police officers are trained, and I want to see what literature he went through. So let's get into it. We'll play it right now. So enough of me yammering on. Let's get into it.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. All right, thank you. So I just want to say thank you to Myron and Rennie just to set the pace and set the tone for this conversation today. So because of time, I'm just going to jump right into my talk. Looking at the fear of black men, a fanon cartography of anti.
I'm glad they put this up here because I was kind of listening to it before, in the background. So I'm glad that he's got a really thick African accent, as you can hear. But he's now living in the state of Texas. So I am glad that they actually put these the words. I'm blacking out here. I'm blanking out here. They put the the words at the bottom of the screen here.
Black misandry. As psychosocial pathology. So he's kind of going to get into it here. So the fear of black men ? A Fanonian cartography, which is kind of a mapping of anti-black misandry as a psychosexual pathology. What does that title mean? So a Fanonian cartography. So this man right here, I believe I have his picture here. This man right here, franzfanon, was a psychiatrist from the Afro-Caribbean Pan-African philosophy mindset. Grew up in France. I'm not exactly sure. He's on Wikipedia. He can be looked up. He wrote a book that I read called, I think it's Black Skins, White Mask. I think that's the name of it. Black Skin, White Mask, or White Skin, something. Black Mask and Skins and all that. Do I have the book here? It might be on my Kindle. franzfanon. It's probably on my Kindle. Black Skins, White Masks, something like that. So he wrote that book, and so this is what he's talking about. So when he's talking about this mapping of what we're doing here, he's looking at it through the lens of what franzfanon says. So he's going to quote Fanon as we go forward here. So here we go. I came to this research, just trying to...
forgive me one more time. Forgive me. Psychosexual pathology. What he's saying is, and this has been documented in many sociological literature, that many times when they were arresting black males, the 40s, 50s, even up until, I believe one of the last cases I read was in the 1990s, where they being police officers, would intentionally go for the genitals of the black males, right? Extra patting down in that area, extra. Even during lynchings, they would cut the penises off. Just all kind of crazy stuff that was going on because in their mind they had an infatuation with the male phallus, right? So this is what he's saying is that these police officers are still engaging in this type of psychosexual pathology where they still have this infatuation with the black male phallus. This is what he's saying. So this is Fanonian mapping out of the hatred of black men from hating and having this same type of hate-love relationship with their phallus. That's what he's saying here, and he's going to talk about police officers.
Look at the very popular common narrative about black men as being very dangerous. As you can see from my slide, right? Dangerous black men. And so I started to understand how law enforcement in America continued to use this trope, this sort of narrative to get away from crimes, even when these crimes are recorded on video, right? And so I thought that within black male studies, this is something that we need to investigate. And I thought Fanon helps us with this theory of racial phobogenics to try to uncover this narrative as a form of psychosexual pathology. So that's what I'm going to be arguing, and just because of time, show some aspect of Fanon's work that really helps to theorize this notion. And so what is really interesting about this narrative about the fear of Black men is that in most of the situations where police officers in America kill Black men and boys, they make this argument and say, oh, I killed because I feared for my life. So even though we do see evidence that the Black males are often unarmed and undeserving of death and dying. And so the narrative of fear is often used to portray a picture of the necessity to obliterate something dangerous, something unwanted, a dangerous, threatening thing from the face of the earth. And most times when these narratives are put up, is done to assuage the feelings of any would-be sympathizers to the plight of Black males in America. I do want to just say ahead that I have a few images on my slide that people could find distressing, but I really think that we need to see those images, to unpack what I'm really talking about here, because when we speak about the deaths and the dying of Black males in America, it is better to speak with factual data rather than hypothetical conjectures. I don't think that's something that a luxury that we can afford as Black men within empire. And so I'll begin my talk with a case study. Some of us may be familiar with this case study. So the officer on the slide is Betty Shelby, a white police officer who was captured on video in 2016. She literally killed Terrence Clutcher, and she claimed in the court that she had feared for her life because she thought that he was reaching for his gun. So we can see the image, right? It's the physical evidence right there is so clear. But the court, of course, filled with most white members of jury, acquitted Shelby of first-degree murder because she feared. So fear then became a rational justification and exculpatory evidence for killing at will, basically. And we see this pattern of citing fear as an excuse for killing Black men and boys, also in the death of Philando Castile in 2016 as well. We know that Officer Yanez, who killed them, also claimed that he had feared for his life, and that's why he had shot him to death. So in these cases and many others like it, that involves the death of Black men and boys, what it really unravels and unpacks for us is this unmistakable fact that is Black male life in America is easily disposable. It is a necessary racial sacrifice, to use the words of Derek Bell. Derek Bell talks about, racial sacrifice, that we have to spill, the blood that needs to be spilled in order to assuage the feelings and the comfort of white folks. And so the reality is that we live in a society where police officers and
now I don't have any problem with what he said thus far, right? Derek Bell, another I don't know what his title was, black sociologist. He might have been at North Carolina. At the University of North Carolina. Derek Bell, again, these people are all talking about, in order to assuage the fears, the angst, the anxiety of white America was to spill black blood. I think all of that is true. I don't have any problem with that. I'm not saying it's true I'm not saying it's true today, but certainly in the history of the United States, this has definitely been the case. Anytime there was we look at the different race riots that have occurred or the different lynchings that have occurred, this was all at the hands of someone feeling upset, anxious, fearful somehow, and at the end of their anger was the black boogeyman. So I don't have any issues with what he's saying thus far. Now he's going to get into police.
White vigilantes can conveniently claim that they were uniquely afraid of Black boys and men as a justification to end their lives. So the task of my paper then is to, like I started by talking about Fanon, is to use Fanon's concept of racial phobogenic to analyze some of the fatal and dangerous consequences of the negative characterizations of Black males as bodies that needs to be feared, tamed, and silenced permanently. And so Fanon's concept of racial phobogenics is this sort of process of making a race and gendered body into something that it is not. It is a transformation that is happening at the metaphysical, ontological levels, and also the empirical level. So it is a broad transformation and the remaking of the black body, the black male body, into something that it is not. In other words, when you, and I think something that you were talking about earlier, Myron, about the arbitrary set of violence under social dominance theory gets to this as well. That when it comes to the remaking and the reengineering of black male bodies, the plasticity, it's open to different forms of construction. I can literally argue that you deserve to die because you make me uncomfortable, because I fear that you have some evil intent, even when you have the most, the best of intent. So literally, the life of a black male then becomes something that becomes fungible within hegemonic context. And I believe in my work, I call this out as a form of anti-black misogyny that is born out of psychosocial pathology. So specifically, I want to look at a few sections in Black Skin, White Mask where Fanon was actually trying to unpack this. So in Black Skin, White Mask, I have the quote on the slide. Fanon described a transaction between a white mother and a son who expressed paralyzing, racializing fear upon contact with him on the street or public space. Upon citing Fanon, a black abnormality within the cocoon of representation that normalizes whiteness, the young white boy called out, "Maman, look, a Negro, I'm scared. I am afraid, I'm scared." Literally, what Fanon is then saying is that the realities of black male lived experience within racializing context is the depicting of the body schema, a body schema that you don't even own. So as a black male being in predominantly white spaces, being in a hegemonic context, your body and your reality is not even owned by yourself, because you can be reconstructed in the white imagination as something that is negated, something that needs to be feared, and something that needs to be put down. And so Fanon then is saying, with this, in Black Skin, White Mask, that even in the very ways the white kid, the white male is socialized to think of black male bodies, there is a psychological thing there that has to do with fear. The fear is built in from childhood to adulthood.
I agree. And so this is the problem, right? This comes through media studies will verify this. What the first movie that was played in the White House was, what was that movie? Whatever it was, put out by the KKK. The fear, Birth of a Nation, right? All this, yeah, it's all been baked in, from the law enforcement to the education system to the portrayal of us in the media to all these different aspects and facets of life. It's all been built in. So they're inherently trained to be this and to think this way. Jane Elliott, the anti-racist scholar and presenter or orator, has often said, if you grew up in the United States and you went to public school here and you're not a racist, then you weren't paying attention. So this is what he's talking about. And franzfanon was speaking about what goes on in France, in another place, in the Caribbean and other places, right? I'm not pretending to be a Fanon scholar. I did read his book. I'm not pretending to be a scholar on his complete history. But this is the point, and I agree with that. So these people who are scared as little adults and being adulterated and educated in this system, implicitly, explicitly socialized to think this way, grow up to become police officers. Yes, I admit that. And the same indoctrination goes towards black individuals who then grow up to become police officers. So they have to be educated out of it as well. And this is that's extremely controversial. But there is evidence that says that even sometimes black officers will act just as incorrectly as white officers. And things along those lines. So we all are dealing with the socialization against us, and that is something that we really have to recognize. So that I do appreciate this actual slide presentation, but I am going to push back and say that we're not. You don't go to the academy and get trained in it.
That's the genius of Fanon. So Fanon then says, through this sort of psychosexual pathology that is developed in white men from an early age that they carry into adulthood, there is this reconstruction, a recalibration of a phobogenic object. It becomes an object, a phobogenic object, because phobia is moved into what it means to be a biological being. So Fanon is also bringing a complex contraption of ontology, biology, and gendered embodied racism to this notion of phobogenic object. So who is the phobogenic object for Fanon? The phobogenic object is the black male. He is projected as a deviation from the social categories of power and as a dangerous threat within human community. He doesn't belong to the human community.
Wow. Look at that statement there. A phobogenic object, the black male, is projected as a deviation from the social categories of power. Where we get power from, right? We look at power, whatever, a white male, wearing a suit, whatever we envision when we think about power, who should control power. And the black male is considered a deviation from that. So therefore he must be controlled and or eliminated. That's what Fanon is arguing.
So in Black Skin, White Mask, Fanon then considers the common citation of fear as a justification for killing black males as an irrational fear that plays on the stereotype of black men as a socially deviant and violent being that needs to be subdued. So when we use Fanon's phobogenics, I think that we can then begin to challenge these notions, these inherently, toxic notions that we get on social media, that we make go trendy, in our life, and we accept it as something that we cannot do nothing about, right? So what does it then mean to begin to rethink through this notion of phobogenics, how whiteness works? And you know what? I also went as far as researching the ways in which police officers are trained regarding how they should engage with black male bodies. And I saw.
What did he just say? He said he researched. I want to play it again. He researched how police officers were trained when they deal with black male bodies. That's what he said. Now, there's 50 states, over 18,000 police departments. Most of them share. I would venture to say that they share training. So we whittle that number down from 18,000 police departments to, it's got to be a little bit more than 50. Let's say there's 100 police academies, 200 at the most in the United States, and they're training this. So let me try to rewind it here.
What does it mean to begin to rethink through this notion of phobogenics, how whiteness works? And you know what? I also went as far as researching the ways in which police officers are trained regarding how they should engage with black male bodies. And at some point, I'll be showing some data from actual government documents that shows that even in the very ways white police officers are trained to engage with a black body, it's always from the point of death. There is the problem of dual fear. One fear is called natural instinct, and the other is fear, psychological fear that has been imbibed. So he goes forward to say the Negro assembling with cold, the cold that chills the bones, the lovely little white boy assembling because he thinks the Negro is assembling with rage. The little boy runs to his mother, "Mama, the Negro is going to eat me." So what Fanon reveals here is how he's being framed in negative light, when in reality he was really suffering from the effect of cold weather. So this is similar to the reality of black men and boys in the United States, whose suffering are discountenanced and whose desperate pleas for life are ignored in situations where they are confronted with police brutality and white vigilante violence. So what this shows is the weaponization of white fear against black males often involves projecting them as object of anxieties and racial phobogenics. And so Fanon's concept of racial phobogenics entails the process of making the black body into this object of anxiety that could be subjected to the most visceral reactions human puts up against what they naturally fear. And that's so I like to cite evidence from the US Commission on Civil Rights, which is a bipartisan independent commission of the United States federal government. This is government data. This is not my opinion. Created by the Civil Rights Act of 1957. In this report, it was found and stated that the logic of fear is built into the way police men and women are trained. Quote, police are therefore taught to shoot before a threat is fully analyzed, because messages such as hesitation with a black male can be fatal, or complacency with black.
He keeps throwing the word black in there. That's not in the report, and we're going to read it here. That's the problem that I'm having, right? This is an academic at Howard University telling you this, that they're dealing with black people differently. Listen to it again. This is why I made this video.
Found and stated that the logic of fear is built into the way police men and women are trained. Quote, police are therefore taught to shoot before a threat is fully analyzed, because messages such as hesitation with a black male can be fatal, or complacency with black men kills. These are reinforced consistently throughout an officer's training. So when this happens, this is how policemen and women are trained. Police reform experts then argue that this type of formal training and informal conversation that highlight and exacerbate the perpetuate fear increase the likelihood that an officer may use excessive force.
Okay, so we're going to pause it right there from what this guy is saying, and we are going to actually take a look at the report. We're going to take a look at the report here. Okay, here we go. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. Okay, we are going to take a look at this report. And I'm gonna use the whole screen here. Let's see. Let's see. This is the report, as you can see, right? This is the same report he just had. Let's go down a little bit here. Right, so you know I'm not playing with this stuff here, right? I'm assuming you guys can see this here. Yeah. All right. Just want to go down here a little bit here. All right, so we're gonna read through this, right? So I'm not. It's 230 pages. We're not gonna. I'm not gonna read 230 pages. But I do want to. Go down to, as you can see right here, highlighted findings and recommendations, right? Executive summary, findings and recommendations. We'll read through that, and then we'll go to some other parts that he got here, right? Certainly, the whole report can be read, right? It's accessible online. Just Google the name of it, and it'll come up. Highlighted findings: police officers have the difficult and admirable job of providing crucial services to communities they protect and serve. Their jobs sometimes put them in harm's way and may require the use of force. Accordingly, police officers must operate within the highest standards of professionalism and accountability. Every community resident should be able to live, work, and travel confident in an expectation that their interaction with police officers will be fair, operate consistent with constitutional norms, and be guided by public safety, free from bias or discrimination. Completely agree. Unfortunately, too many communities are not confident in that expectation and do not trust fair police-community interactions. Communities have demanded reforms to foster better community-police relations and to prevent unjustified and excessive police uses of force. Accurate and comprehensive data regarding police uses of force is generally not available to the police departments of the American public. No comprehensive national databases exist that capture rates of police use of force. This is definitely a problem. The best available evidence reflects high rates of use of force nationally, and increased likelihood of police use of force against people of color, people with disabilities, LGBT people, people with mental health concerns, people with low incomes, and those at intersections of these groups. Lack of training and lack of funding for training leave officers and the public at risk. Critical training areas include tactical training, de-escalation techniques, understanding cultural differences, and anti-bias mechanisms, as well as strategies for encounters with individuals with physical and mental disability. Repeated and highly publicized incidents of police use of force against persons of color and people with disabilities, combined with lack of accurate data, lack of transparency about policies and practices in police in place governing use of force, and lack of accountability for non-compliance foster a perception that police use of force police use of force in communities of color and the disability community is unchecked, unlawful, and unsafe. Highlighted recommendations. Here's what they recommend. The Department of Justice should return to vigorous enforcement of constitutional policing, including pursuant 42 U.S. 141, and use of consent decrees as necessary where constitutional policing standards are not being upheld. Well, I believe it was the Trump administration who ceased that, because there was a bunch under Obama. When did he leave office? 2016? The Department of Justice should robustly support local efforts to develop and institute constitutional policing practices. Support should include reinstating Office of Community-Oriented Policing, COPS, and maintaining community relations services, CRS, to focus on building community trust and reducing excessive forces. Coordination with departments of police departments. DOJ support should include grant support as well as generation of federal guidance supporting development of effective police training policies and internal accountability measures that promote expanded strategies and tactics that safeguard the lives of officers and citizens. Congress should do X, Y, and Z, right? Then it's got these 4 bullet points. What are the more recommendations? Officers should be trained on de-escalation tactics and alternatives to use of force. Tactical training should include strategies to create time, space, and distance to reduce the likelihood that force will be necessary and should occur in realistic conditions appropriate to the department's location. Courts and legislatures should require judges to preside over grand jury proceedings and open the records of these proceedings in police use of force cases to the public, in cases where the identity of the subject of the investigation is already public. Investigation and prosecution of uses of force should be made as independent and public as possible. Independent. The agencies in determining whether to move forward with prosecution. Departments should provide aggregate information to the public regarding the numbers of allegations of use of force, etc., etc. Anything. And anything in there, in these highlighted recommendations about stopping police officers from their training deficiencies or what he's claiming is going on in training academies. And I'm not saying it's not happening. He's going to give a story. I'm not saying that none of this, that there aren't instances where you have a racist or implicitly an officer who's operating with an implicit bias saying things to younger officers. I'm not saying that that's not happening. And those things, but he's saying that he's checked the training records. And that's why I want to read his report. Wait a minute. You told me that you telling me that you went to different police academies or states and that you found training records, you found PowerPoints, you found video presentations of police officers saying this crazy stuff that we target black people? That we shoot black people because we're scared of them? That's what he just said. Implicit bias training, right? So all this is in here, right? I'm not going to obviously go through all this, but I wanted to read something that he said to give it context. I don't know. He said something on page 119, and we'll get to it in a second here. So I'm on page 118. However, some police officers and law enforcement officials have cited concerns that the hesitation these techniques require may cost officers their lives. Talking about de-escalation training, not acting, not going forward, right? And a common motto among officers is complacency kills. I don't think, yes, that's true, but that's not what that means. That means becoming routine, not, keeping up on training and tactics, not watching suspects' hands. That's what they mean by complacency. Seth Stoughton, a retired officer and now professor of law who researches policing, has written that traditionally training has emphasized officer safety above all else, and new recruits are taught that the first rule of law enforcement is go home at the end of their shift. I do not disagree with any of that. On the surface, this message is not problematic due to obvious safety reasons for both law enforcement and the communities they serve. However, Stoughton argues that it is problematic when officers are taught that every encounter and every individual is a potential threat. We do teach that. I was an instructor. That is taught. Because we do not know, and we should. That doesn't mean that I do agree that there has to be a balance in saying this and then how you operate. We should develop plans, tactics, look for places to hide for cover, things like that, but still maintain a demeanor that is calm, that is reasonable, and that is showing empathy for the person that we are there to protect and to serve. When exaggerated or imbalanced, right? This is what I'm just saying. These messages can overemphasize the possibility of threat or danger, as opposed to focusing on how best to protect communities. Stoughton explains that these messages are not just verbally explained to officers, they are also shown painfully vivid, heart-wrenching dashcam footage of officers being beaten, disarmed, or gunned down after a moment of inattention or hesitation. They are told that the primary culprit isn't the felon on the video, it's the officer's lack of vigilance. That is true. We are taught that, right? Be vigilant, be assertive, etc., etc. That is true. Retired officer Stoughton, now law professor, argues that such messages of hesitations can be fatal or complacency kills are constantly reinforced through their officers' training. And he believes that police are therefore taught to shoot before any threat is fully analyzed. I don't agree with that. This is difficult. This is difficult because if you're waiting for it to be fully realized by the time that your eyes see it, your brain processes it, it can be a problem. And listen, I get that this is problematic. I get that this is problematic, and we can go both ways. I've taken 4 science classes, all this kind of stuff. I get it. I understand that. My argument today is that this professor, or wherever he is saying that this is what that police officers are being trained to do this to black people and to the exclusion of everyone else. That's what he's saying. He being Stone, argues that a common phrase among officers sums up the mentality: better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Therefore, he argues that when shooting happens, it is often not because an officer is angry, frustrated, or biased. Instead, they shoot because they are afraid. Police reform experts argue that this type of formal training and informal conversations that highlight, exacerbate, and perpetuate fear increase the likelihood that an officer may use excessive force. Right? So as long as we're training a fearful method, there's going to be this fear. There's going to be this. And rather than focus on fear training and changing officers, cultural norms could encounter and possibly reduce fear, while teaching officers how to effectively manage it and how to operate around it instead of acting on it. Well, that's going to take more training. It's going to take more training in order to get officers to be able to control their fear, control their anxiety. And yes, that part of that is going to be implicit bias training to counteract all of the years and all the messages that we've got now. I think that society is doing a much better job now. The fact that you can't watch a commercial, and I'm being hyperbolic here, the fact you can't watch a commercial that isn't some interracial couple says a whole lot. The fact that many times in the 1960s and 70s, they wouldn't show a black hand touching a dish soap or touching a product because they thought that it would be repulsive to the white individuals, and so therefore it would cease to sell their product. The fact that you can now see a number of black individuals in these commercials says volumes. And that will have an effect on the youngsters who grow up seeing this type of thing, become normalized in this type of thing, and won't have those same prejudices and implicit biases as officers later on. Great job. Great job.
As I approach the conclusion of my presentation, I'd like to also state that a Fanonian analysis provides us a lens to view this fabrication of the fear of black men or black males as a deadly misandric aggression. The notion of fear is often used to justify or as a justification or rationale for killing of black men and bodies by white police officers and vigilantes is nothing but a fabrication. So that needs to be said. So Fanon gets us to that account. It's a fabrication that is invented to mirror the historical racist stereotypes of black males as dangerous brutes that deserve to be put down. It is also used as a smoking to galvanize support from white people who may otherwise be adverse to such visceral and lethal violence being perpetrated against blacks. I think many of us will remember this picture, this image, and that was cited in the same document that I used for my research, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights 2018 report on the use of force in policing, right? So this is the former South Carolina police officer, Michael Slager, who was convicted of shooting death of Walter Scott, right? So, but what's interesting is, these quotes from this commission, the report. Even though the video evidence shows that Scott was actually running away from him, he went to court and said, "Oh, I still fear for my life, and that's why I killed him. I shot him 5 times in the back." So this appears to my mind in research that it's something that we need to theorize, that the fabrication of fear as a small screen is a small screen. It's a small screen, and police officers know that when they cite this, they can avoid legal sanctions for applying unwarranted lethal force against Black people. And I think the question then becomes, what do we do? I think, Myron Clay, what you're saying about counterinsurgency becomes important. What do we do?
Here's the problem. And I get what he's saying about fear. You go to court and the police officer can just say, "I'm scared. I was fearful for my life," et cetera, et cetera. But what's often missing from this, and this is, listen, being a Black man, I get it. I want to be, safe and sound as I travel and move. I want my kids to be safe and sound. But I was also in this line of work, and it paid the bills, and it was a good job, and I enjoyed it very much. I think that more people ought to join it. So we can correct from the inside the problems and deficiencies that are there. Here's the problem with fear. We have to recognize that police officers have the right to be scared, because in this country, I think he's going to say it during the question and answer. I think he's going to say in the question and answer session, or maybe I read it. Actually, I read it in the Commission on Civil Rights that I read from before, as I was reading through it. The problem is with the fear argument is that police officers of all stripes, whether you're in an urban setting or a suburban setting or the countryside, one officer in the middle of Wyoming, your backup is 200 miles away or whatever it is, right? Craziness. Whenever you approach someone, and this is what Seth Stoughton was speaking about, is that these individuals who you're confronting, oftentimes, you have no clue of whether they're armed. We have something different here that they have in the UK or in Iceland and other places. It's called the Second Amendment. So there is an assumption, and this is taught in academies. There is the assumption that every single person that you speak to is armed, that there is a gun somewhere on the premises that you have entered, that there is a gun in the car that you have just pulled over. You cannot get around that. You can't. So this is what the fear is. So when we talk about shooting people before the realization or the full threat has been analyzed or rationalized, before your mind can comprehend what's happening to you, and therefore when your mind, but before all that, they're going to act. And I get that there's a certain level of fear, and we should not be operating under that. But that exists as a safety measure for our own lives. I'm not saying that it's easy, and there's going to be experts who are going to come on both sides about how do we mitigate this actual rational fear. That if I don't take precautions now, if I don't act now, then by the time that my brain tells my hand to move or my legs to move, the bullet could be entering my body, or it could be in the air or exiting the pistol in the air, and by that time it's too late. It's too late. So I think I've proven a lot. I want to keep going here. But this fear that he's talking about isn't a fear of Black men. It's the fear of not knowing whether whoever you're dealing with, male, female, young kid, 15-year-old, 14-year-old, boy or girl, do I admit that fear is heightened with Black men? I do. I actually admit that. There's some implicit bias studies that say that. There's some implicit bias studies that say that's not the case. The research is all over the place.
I think first we need to unpack what it is. Call it out for what it is. Because these magic words should not be sufficient to absolve murderers of the killing of Black men and boys. So I'll end here by saying that what I've really tried to establish in my talk briefly is just this notion that the fear used by police officers is unjustified. It's really a fabrication. And when we look at Fanon's, phobogenics, racial phobogenics,
it's not a fabrication. What he's attempting to do is link Franzfanon's. Remember, Franzfanon, I think he died in like 1961. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that was a reprint he put up there 2008. I think he died in 1960. He died in the 1960s, I'm pretty sure. So Franz Fanon was definitely talking about a different time, and I'm not saying it's 100% gone. I'm not saying that at all. But he's conflating these two issues: that the fear that white people had, and particularly at that time, the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, when he's growing up, right? This fear is not the same fear that we have in the 2000s or in the new 21st century. It's just not. And he's conflating, saying that fear of the mama, there's a Negro over there, is the same as the fear that a police officer has when he's in the rural parts of Idaho and he's pulling somebody over, he's pulling a white guy over, and he doesn't know if this white guy has a gun because there's the Second Amendment. It's not the same fear. But it could be the same fear when you walk into a courtroom, and would that same Idaho officer have a little bit more fear if it's a black man that he's never seen before? It's totally possible. I admit that. But let's not say that these people, but that's not something he's getting from the police academy. It's not something he's gotten from the state police academy. If anything, that's something we've got to deal with within our own prejudices, with our education system, with our media, which I'm saying is being done. Right? You can't go anywhere without a diversity and inclusion type of thing. You can't go. You can't watch a TV show without being undone. The more movies we have, the more commercials we have, the more socialization we have with college campuses, the more socialization we have with schools, with intermingling of schools. Then this thing will become less and less, and maybe that fear of a different individual will be lessened. Remember, this is a phenomenon that happens with the black males as well. So we've got to diminish across the board, and black and white, all that, great. But we still have to deal with the fear or the concern, maybe that's a better word, a concern that any officer that pulls over any individual has, because you don't know if that person is armed. So he's conflating these two ideas.
It gives us everything that we need to know about, the fabrication, and that how black men are sort of constructed as something that is otherwise good. And so I think that in black male studies, we really have to push back against these sort of psychosocial pathologies and absolutely reject it whenever it's offered as justification for killing black men and boys. So that's where I will end. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna fast forward it now to the next individual.
I have a question.
Yes.
I didn't want to answer. I was just sitting here thinking, and you guys did. I wish I could listen to 3 or 4 more hours of you guys talking about these things. When
Nipsey Hussle, he's got. Is that Nipsey Hussle next to Malcolm X? Okay.
And I may have covered this already, but when a policeman, I'm from military, so I know a little bit about weapons and deciding when to shoot. But the policemen, they always say they only have a split second to decide. And so I'm thinking, what is the greatest factor? At first I thought that the greatest factor was I saw a weapon, and that's why I had to shoot. But after listening to you all, I'm thinking that's not the greatest factor in the decision to shoot. So let's just tell me what you think of what do you think their decision in that split second? What is the one thing that says I need to shoot?
So I could take that and then I can.
It was difficult to hear. I think he said, "What is in that split second? What is the one thing? What is the deciding factor? What is the process that you're going through in that one split second to shoot?" To shoot, and I'm going to answer this as a police officer and as a black, and I'm going to tell you that you don't know. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, wrong, right, wrong. I'm saying that your training, experience should come into play, that you know where weapons are hidden at, you know where people are not cooperating, not being compliant. All of these things are taken into. So let's expand upon this 1 second thing for a second here, for a second here, right? So it's not just the police officer just walks up, it just starts blowing rounds. That's not what happens. There is generally a pattern of erratic, illicit, uncooperative behavior. Get your hands out of your pockets. Sir, I told you again, why do you keep putting your hands in your pockets? Sir, why do you keep trying to go to your trunk of your car? Sir, why do you keep looking over your shoulder? Sir, why are you doing this? Why are you not cooperating? Sir, listen to me. Focus on what I'm saying. Why? And all of this and none of this, this is building a framework and a groundwork for the fear, if you want to use that term, to rise within these individuals. So that is causing the individual, the police officer in this case, to have their anxiety, their awareness, and their fear level to go up because of this anxieties. Now, I agree that in certain circumstances, you take the officer who shot Philando Castile, who he just overreacted and panicked. Man, this guy told me he got a gun. Oh, my training, this guy's got a gun. He's put your hands where I can see him. That is completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. I don't know how this man got off, but he did, because people are willing to give deference to police officers because they know generally 9 times out of 10 they're going to do the right thing. And so therefore, but we don't hold those individuals accountable. Now, I don't know if I would agree that his panic should have brought him to prison, but it certainly ought to spark some type of reforms. It wasn't like he woke up in the morning and said, I'm going to kill Philando Castile. But so prison isn't always the answer either. But we've got to hold these people accountable. So we're going to listen to what he has to say. But I'm going to tell you from an officer's perspective, from a force science certification expert to one who's done this, that this is what goes on in their minds. And so let's hear what he has to say.
Other panelists can jump in as well. So from my research, I've been looking at sort of a lot of training documents and videos on how policemen are trained, and also have some, white police officers as friends, and just trying to, pick their brains.
This man said that he has looked at training documents and manuals. That's what he just said. That he's looked at training manuals, and that's what he said. Now listen to what the rest of what he's going to say. He's looked at training manuals, and he's talked to his white police officer friends and people he knows about how they train and what they're going on in police academies. This is what he said.
So there is this, when you're talking about the weapon, right? So the presence of a weapon as the determinant to making a split-second decision. But that there's more than that. It's not just the presence of a weapon. A white male police officer literally told me, if he sees a black male driving around with the windows down in the summer, that person is violent. That's a quote right there, direct quotation. I say it again so you can hear it. He literally says, in the summer, in Texas, that's why I live currently. He's like, in the summer, Texas can be up to 100 degrees and 110 degrees in the summer. He was like, literally, if we see someone, a black male driving around town with the windows down in the summer, that person is violent, and we're going to call back up and we're going to chase him down.
Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. I can't get access to this paper that he wrote. However, he's saying he went to training manual. I am certainly willing to say and willing to agree with that there are certain police officers who think just like he said, who are training other individuals that this is what's going on. But he's saying that when you go to the police academy, that this is the training manual. This is the PowerPoints that you receive. This is what's put on the screen. This is reinforced time after time, that whenever you see a black man in a car in the summertime, that this is what's going on. There's no way that it's happening. That is not occurring. That is not occurring in any 50 states. I've got to see those training manuals. I swear I find 5 different universities to get access to that, and I haven't seen it. Are there racist police officers still on the force today? Of course there are. Are there people that we can still find out probably still have some Confederate gear and Confederate flags and KKK? Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I have no problem. Absolutely. I've done shows about it. I don't even doubt that this more than likely was an actual conversation that somebody had with him. I'd like to see it, like to read it, but it's just I don't believe that this is part of these documents are inspected by the state. You got a training manual. The PowerPoint says that we pull people over because they're black and driving around in the summertime with the windows down, and that person is inherently violent. In that case, that black man but it's a black female. She's not. A Hispanic female, they're not. A white male is Asian male, they're not. But the black male is in the middle of the summer. And that is a real, legal, justifiable reason to pull this man over? No way that's occurring.
So it's not just about training. It's not just about reasonableness. Man, I'm getting emotional. As you can. Yeah. You could tell I'm passionate about this, because it's a lived experience. And as someone who lives in a predominantly white town, going out every day, knowing that my body could be put down within a second. And so it's just that realization of the reality of the Black male lived experience.
Is this he lives in a predominantly white town, that's what he said. Does he have any anecdotal experiences that he would say that he drove around in the state of Texas with his windows down and been pulled over? Does he have any experiences of any of this stuff, about any of the allegations about excessive uses of force, unfair targeting, unfair treatment, driving while Black? And does he have any of these type of experiences? Are we only experiences he can give us about some cop who said this about that? Listen, I'm a Black man and I want to see us all do well, but you can't put out nonsensical foolishness and call it scholarship.
It's not about whether or not you look nice or you smile at white people or you wear a jacket and there's no amount of whiteness you can perform that's going to prevent you from being killed. Because from what I found out in the training is that the very ways there's a psychological problem. It's a psychosocial pathology. The very ways white boys are socialized is to fear Black men.
He said from the training, it's a psychosexual problem. That when we target individuals, when we go through handcuffing drills, when we go through pat-down drills, when we go through reasons to stop individuals, when we go through constitutional law, when we go through state law, when we go through motor vehicle law, when we go through the physical trainings, when we go through human behavior classes like I used to teach, when we go through all these different teachings, implicit bias training, de-escalation training that they're not requiring, when we go through history of police, all the procedural justice, police legitimacy, all these different types of trainings that go on in police academies. He's saying he's seen the manuals, he's seen the PowerPoints, he's seen this and said that this is the way that they're being trained. And it's a psychosexual problem. And they are being trained in the police academies to touch Black men's nuts and to touch Black men's phalluses, to touch their penises and to feel them up and to grope them and to have this psychosexual erotic sensation in time when they're being pulled over. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm not saying that there isn't a mindset out there that is not entertaining these thoughts. That's not my argument. My argument is that that's not being taught in the police academy. That's what my argument is.
That's where the problem is. So you don't have to see a weapon. In the cases that I cited in my talk, there were no weapons. Yet these white people got off the hook of justice, even though investigation showed that there were no weapons. So the problem is not weapons. And I think that's why Fanon is brilliant. Fanon is saying,
he's linking it again. I agree that some of these cases were tragic. I can't believe they got off either. I get that. And I'm agreeing that there is a level of fear concern. I'm equating it all here. Anxiety of being a police officer and doing your job because you don't know if the person is armed. I will also stipulate that level can be heightened when you see, number one, a male, period, and then a Black male may even go up even more, right? Because males are inherently more dangerous than females. Okay, so that may go up even more. We got to do something about that. We got to do something to bring that level of disassociation between Black male and white male down to parity, right? We got to bring that down to parity, right? Because males are inherently more dangerous. Let's just all be males, whether you see an Asian male, white male, Black male, Middle Eastern male, they all should be seen as a male, right? But again, now he's linking that to what franzfanon was talking about and saying that these all had to be put down And I'm saying that this is a different time and different generation than what Fanon. I'm not saying we should totally ignore Fanon, and we should always keep these things in the back of our mind, and we should move in that way. And we don't know if the police officer that we're dealing with, or the teacher that we're dealing with, or the whoever, or the lawyer that we're dealing with, the judge has these implicit biases. We should all operate that way. But we can't just link the same, and that's what he's attempting to do. That is what he is attempting to do, is to link what franzfanon was saying back when the time that he was doing his analysis, and to link that to today. And the fear that these people reacted, and possibly, more than likely, in my estimation, did overreact in the case of Terrence Crutcher, in the case of Philando Castile. These people overreacted. And yes, they overreacted more than likely because they were black males. I'm not disputing that. My disagreement is that he's saying that these psychosexual fantasies and pathologies are taught in the police academy. He's not saying that they're taught when they sit in the cruiser in their field training program. I would agree. I wouldn't have made an argument about that. But he's saying it's taught in the academy, and he's seen the documents. Come on, bro. Come on, man.
That as a black person, when you deal with white people in white spaces, you're already irrational. You're disconfigured. You're not human. And so I think that's how I approach that question. The question is not about what you can do to make white police officers feel comfortable, or if they need to see X, Y, and Z to think that if you're a black male, you are just marked for death, because there's something about the psychopathology that comes to the mind of police officers that when we see you're deadly.
Yeah, but this psychosexual pathology comes from a history of legacy of racism. We get that. Is that same cycle of pathology going on today? Are they still teaching the same? And listen, this country's not perfect. Our education system's not perfect. They don't want to teach critical race theory. This is a big, I get it. I'm not disputing that. But to stand up here or to sit there on a Zoom, whatever, put up here that this is taught in academy, not in school. He's not saying he is saying to a certain point that this is a socialization problem, that we have been socialized with this way, and I'm putting this together, they're taking the socialization into their jobs, and he's saying it's being reinforced and or tolerated and or taught in the academy. Come on, dude. Come on, man. Come on. Where's Lil Boosie at? Come on, man. Come on.
Also go as far as saying, when a black male is involved, if you hesitate, your life could be taken away from you. Think about it. So they're already dealing the standpoint of the engagement with black male bodies is from the point of the fact that they're threats and they could kill you. So you have to always, engage with them legally. So that's how I respond to that question.
I mean, if I could add to it, I think policing is good, especially the way Bio and Dr. Ruway talked about it, because in my theory about counterinsurgency, what I'm trying to describe is policing as counterinsurgency. This is how counterinsurgencies are implemented. Armed social workers, they have the discretion to kill. And you see this being implemented all the way back from the 1840s in Algeria, all the way going forward. What you have in the late 1960s in response to anti-colonialism, the Black Panther Party, the human rights movement, you have the collapsing of the policing field into a singular domain. The entire world is a singular domain for the application of counterinsurgency principles. So that's why you see this symmetry between the military and, the police. And, I know a police officer too. I have a good friend who's a police officer, and he formerly killed a black man in Arizona. He's a white male. And he will tell you, he know he was irrational. He know he killed this man in his house for a domestic violence call. He murdered this man, but the white town in Arizona let him go free. And he chose to walk away from the profession and study criminology to investigate this. But he was not criminally charged for murder. And he recognizes, something's wrong here. So, but I think this is how counterinsurgency works. It's the same thing that you have.
I would agree. Listen, I'm not going to dispute anybody with their experiences or people that they know, and I'm not saying that these things don't happen. And you can operate, and I am stipulating that people can operate under the impression that I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing something that's right in these circumstances. But then when you go back and look at it, like, man, if this was somebody else, if this was better lighting, or if this was a different neighborhood, if this was a more fancier restaurant or neighborhood. Remember the report that we read talked about LGBT police and their inappropriate use of force against members of the LGBT and against those who are suffering from some type of mental breakdown. Right? If things are different, maybe this outcome could have been different. And I stipulate again that maybe if this wasn't a black man, this is probably what this white guy was saying to himself. Man, if this wasn't a black, why did I do that? Where did this problem come in with me at where I jumped the gun? Listen, we got to figure this out. We got to figure it out.
Soldiers arguing about during the campaign in Afghanistan. Why do I have to give food to the baby? Because you're an armed social worker. That's why the police show up when you call for domestic violence, because they're armed social workers. So I wanted to throw that in there as well.
Thank you.
I don't know if I agree with the fact of being armed social workers. I'm not sure I like that argument. The police show up when you domestic violence call because it's a violence call, right? It's a violence call. I mean, it's inherent in the word, right? It's not just a disagreement. It's a violence call, and again, there's an inherent when violence occurs, and it's state actors who are imbued with powers by the state to use violence. And when that violence escalates, they have the right to protect themselves and to protect other persons. So do I think that we ought to have social workers working around the clock to help settle some problems so therefore armed individuals don't have to go? I do agree with that.
So one of the questions from the chat was, in bringing my keynote together with Bio's paper, do you see any overlap between the justification of criminalizing the Central Park Five and your explanation of fear of black men?
Absolutely. So I listened to that talk yesterday, and I think what Dr. Curry's point, was just sort of this idea that you get in gender theory, especially Black feminist theory. That black men, they call it sort of black rage theory, right? So black men are enraged, and they always are sort of moving toward patriarchy, so to patriarchal manhood. So you get this as well in the works of Hooks, and I think specifically one of the things that Dr. Curry mentioned to rebuff that argument is that it's not based in empirical evidence. It's not, and I think that's the genius of Dr. Curry's work. He came in and said, "Hey, here's the data for looking at in the partner violence. We're looking at different categories. This is the data. This is what the empirical data shows. It doesn't actually add up to theory, and that's why I also started my talk by saying when we're engaging with the lived experience of Black men, we have to do it by factual data and not just theory. And so yes, so the first thing is that I think that it helps to all.
Okay. The lived experiences of Black men, right? So this is the problem with what it was mentioned in that Department of Justice report that we read, right? We don't know what the theory is. This is not the lived experiences of Black men. It's the lived experiences of some Black men. It's the lived experiences as far as our fear of what could happen to us. I grant that, but this is not a lived experience of every single, because there's too many encounters, too many motor vehicle stops, too many foot stops, pedestrian stops, too many of them in which Black men walk away completely unharmed, completely unarrested, or not incarcerated, not thrown down. That should be the lived experiences rather than what goes on. In this country, 1,000 people are killed every day, and the majority of them are suffering from some type of mental breakdown, and I think still the majority of them are white. This is not the lived experiences of Black men. And he's bringing us about police. This is not the experience of them.
Also support Dr. Curry's point that much of the characterization that we get in feminist theory about Black men really as violent beasts and rapists who are going around trying to devour people is untrue. And so if that's untrue, then what's a different theory that would help us to sort of explain that phenomena? And I think that's why Fanon becomes important for me. Fanon then says, no, actually it's a psychosocial pathology that is already within the frame of whiteness or the white community, the white dominant framework that they actually utilize to justify the killing of Black men, especially when they use fear as a justification. And I also think that it's a way in which sort of this the caricaturized portrayal of Black men in theory as violent also helps to support this nonsense of the fear of Black men as being dangerous. Because, you know, if you have kids going to school reading these toxic theories about Black men, that's what they're going to believe. And it also would be the ways in which they would tend to engage with Black men.
Okay, I'm actually going to stop it right here because I don't think that they're... So again, I'm not saying that most of these theories that these men have put forth on here were bunk. What I am saying is that this... I don't want to butcher the man's name. Aluwami. I got to see these papers that he's talking about, these publications, these manuals. That's what the man said. And I'm not saying that the racism does not exist. I'm not saying that police officers can't operate this way. I'm not saying they don't have an inherent fear, an innate fear of Black. I would stipulate to all that, right? I think it's gone down way since franzfanon published his work. I think it's gone down with every generation and only going to continue to get better. It's not a lived. I can't grant the fact that it's a lived experience of Black men. Right? Certainly, it's not the lived experiences of Black men. There's way too many encounters that go right, go good. People walk away and don't have these things. Now, is there fear in both sides? Yeah. There's fear of the Black man, probably. The fear within living in neighborhoods? Yeah. Are the police fearful at times? Yes. Are the individuals scared of the police? Yes. That's a lived experience. But even operating under those circumstances, we're still able to get away with all of our lives intact. So let me know your thoughts and your opinions. I went on for this for a little bit here. So let me know your thoughts, your opinions. If you're a police officer, were you taught in the academy? In the academy. Not what you learn on the street. I'm not you could have been taught on the street. Fear these individuals, F these people, like FTO programs, all that. Okay, but he's saying he's seen the manuals. He's seen the training. Come on, man. No, you haven't. All right. I think I've gone on about that long enough. Much love and peace, everyone. Rate, subscribe, and share. Rate, subscribe, and share.